Welcome to the Course En Tête's coverage of the 2021 Tour de France. The Grande Boucle is still here, and so are we, just along with Peloton magazine and our presenting sponsor, Hyperice, keeping this year's teams fresh day after day, and boy, have they needed it. Hello and welcome for the final time on this Tour de France to our Aérogramme subscribers. I'm OJ Borg, excitedly watching the Peloton roll into Paris. Now, we normally try to be fairly time agnostic on these podcasts, but today we are recording it to coincide with the stage finishing and the possibility of Mark Cavendish breaking Eddie Merckx's all-time winning record at the Tour, if I've got my sums right, which, let's be honest, I probably haven't. So what do we know about this year's Tour? We know that the reigning Tour de France champion's reign continues in pretty dominant fashion. Tadej Pogacar is the Cannibal 2.0, and I'd like to call him that because I can't pronounce his name. 5 minutes over Jonas Vingegaard and 7 minutes over Richard Carapaz in third. So we will reflect on how he did it, and if anyone can do anything about a rider that looks not just a class above everyone else, but an entire school, amongst other things, over the next 40 minutes or so. We'll also have reaction on the finish line and hear Cav get emotional, possibly. We don't have Jeremy or Sophie with us in person, but we will have a road diary from them as they recorded their thoughts a few hours ago as they made the epic Trans-France crossing to get to Paris for the final stage. I'm betting there may be swearing, just not sure if we will have an Australian slant or a posh southern one. But Peter Cossins is with me, who I think is back in his Pyrenean lair. Is that right, Pete?
I am back in the Pyrenees and somewhat tired and a little bit tipsy, I'd say.
Oh, so you've taken
on
a
good lunch.
You've taken on the Jeremy role then.
I have indeed, yeah.
For this final podcast, we have writer and master tactical analyst, that's you, Nick Bull, who joins us from what he calls the Paris of England, Greenwich.
You've done the tourist information kind of project there for us, haven't we? I don't need to say any more to that, do I?
No, you don't. But listen, great to have you both with me. Pete, what are your thoughts on the final ceremonial stage into Paris?
I don't like the ceremony of it to start with. I don't like the fact that we kind of have this long, protracted, whatever it is, 80-kilometre roll into Paris from the suburbs where they're toasting each other with champagne and everybody's taking photos. I kind of long for the Bernardino, Jupp Zertemelt days where they kind of attack from the gun and they end up riding onto the Champs-Élysées together. I'd kind of like to see that kind of.
I do. I'm not a fan of it. I love the sprint stage. I love it finishing on the Champs-Élysées, but there's something about that bonhomie which I don't dig.
Yeah, the thing that's always baffled me is why the tour organisers released a time schedule for this stage, because I don't know, it never runs on time, does it? There are a few guarantees in cycling. Geraint Thomas crashing and the Paris stage being about half hour late and just annoying everybody in the kind of the press pack because they want to go to the nearest bar and start their drinking. Really, I don't mind it that much actually. In a week-long stage race, if there is a ceremonial ending, it just does feel a little bit pointless, really, a bit of a wasted day. Whereas they've raced pretty hard for 20 days now, so I don't begrudge them a little bit of champagne or sparkling juice, whatever it is, for the UAE team as they rolled into Paris earlier on.
Exactly. No champagne this year, as there wasn't last year. So let's talk about, it's a bit of a fool's errand for us, as we won't know who's won this stage for at least another 30 minutes or so. So it's a fool's errand, really, to talk about it. But they've changed the actual finishing straight for the first time, haven't they, Nick? They've moved it 300 metres further up the road?
Yeah, which actually kind of poses a bit of a question, really, because Mark Cavendish is always praised for having this photographic memory, and let's not forget that already on this tour he's won in places that he won stages in previous editions of the race. So that's always the interesting thing about Paris. He's won here 4 times, but actually, since his last win in 2012, he's only actually made it to the Champs-Élysées twice. He didn't win here in 2013, and he didn't win here in 2015. So there is that, the winning feeling that he's had in Paris that is a little bit old now, and also this amended finishing straight. It's I think every year, if you've kind of been second wheel coming onto the Champs-Élysées out of that final corner, you basically get the slingshot. You can go long. You can put your arms in the air because you've crossed the line first. Now it's a bit of a longer sprint actually, and it kind of begs the question: how late can you leave it really? What's the optimum position coming out of that final corner? It for something that's such a tradition in the Tour, it kind of adds a bit of intrigue this time around.
I saw this, Pete. Christian Prudhomme said Mark Cavendish is the greatest sprinter in the history of the Tour and of cycling. Do you agree?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I don't think. If we take the Tour as the race that we judge riders by, which essentially we do in terms of stage racing anyway, He's won 34 stages already. I mean, if you look at Marcel Kittel, who was supposed to be one of the other riders you think as the all-time greats. Kittel won 14. I think Andre Greipel, who's still racing, he's racing his last tour stage today. He has 11 or maybe 12 wins. Cav's just way out in front of them, and he is the greatest of all time. I mean, it's been an incredible comeback. It's been an incredible story. Maybe we'll see it go on again next year. It seems like we might.
Well, it does, doesn't it? I think it was Jeremy Whittle who wrote this, who said his triumph over adversity is on par with Tiger Woods winning the 2019 Augusta Masters. Is it that big a comeback?
I think it is as big as that. I think pretty much everybody had written him off.
He wrote himself off. If you listen to what he said, he was in tears. I don't remember which race it was. Which race was it? He was being interviewed at the end.
It was after Gent-Wevelgem, I think.
Gent-Wevelgem. He was in tears. He'd done badly, and he said, "I think that's it." So he pretty much wrote himself off, didn't he?
Yeah, I think there was no hope for him then. He kind of struggled with illness. He'd struggled with motivation. He'd struggled with the Dimension Data team that he was part of. He struggled with his equipment, and it just looked like he was going nowhere. I mean, it really was. His move to Quick-Step was really into the last chance saloon, and it's come off for him. He's kind of gone through those doors into the saloon, and Patrick Lefevre has welcomed him with open arms. Said, "Here you go, here's Michael Morkov," and off you go and start winning stages again.
Yeah, it has been amazing. He now has tour wins over 13 years, spanning 3 decades, which is amazing. But the thing is, though, all of the papers, especially in the UK, as you would guess, we've seen lots of pictures of a smiling Cav wearing green. But on the start line of stage 19, this was captured by somebody in the crowd with a camera phone. This was the day he could have beaten the record as well, Merckx's record. We heard this from him.
Danemark, un ancien vainqueur de Liège, vainqueur de Liège, du Tour de Lombardie, double vainqueur du Critérium du Dauphiné, c'est Jakob Fuglsang.
So he apologised over on Instagram the next day in what was a really awkward photo with the two mechanics. Nick, is that ever okay? That sort of, because it was petulant. I think he would say himself it was petulant.
Yeah, I think you're right on that one. That it was one of those ones where it was a case of, are you sorry for it happening, or are you sorry because you got filmed doing it, really? I know there's always that argument about professional athletes, and to be at the top of the game, they've got to be ruthless. They've got to kind of win at all costs. But actually, there is always a human side to everything. And let's face it, had that mechanic have done something similar and shouted at Cavendish in the same way that Cavendish shouted at him, I think that Patrick Lefevre might have given him his marching orders, and he might not have seen Paris as well. So it sat a little bit uncomfortably with me.
Because he's always been highly emotional. Now, I guess, Pete, the pressure was on him. It was the day he could have beaten the record. He wanted everything to be right. He is going to be on his nerves, isn't he?
I think so, yeah. And I think, he'd really struggled to get through the stages in the Pyrenees. He'd been shepherded in every day by 3 or 4 of his Deceuninck Quick-Step teammates. I actually waited at the finish line at Lussard-Iden to see him come in, and he looked really fatigued that day. And they were smiling. They knew they got through the mountain stages at that point. But I did think, with stage 19 and the possibility of a sprint the next day, it might be difficult for him, and it might have been difficult for all of them, because really they're the only sprint team left in the race, and to carry the responsibility of closing a stage like that down a long stage where there's 15 teams who haven't won a stage yet or are trying to win was probably too much for them, and maybe that was playing on his nerves a bit. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, we'll know by the end of this podcast, and you will know already if you're listening to this whether he's broken the record or not. So we'll talk more about Cav later on. I just want to talk about the tactics, Nick, because obviously you're our master tactician, as I labelled you to start with. How great have they been, Deceuninck Quick-Step, in setting him up for these wins?
Yeah, I think they've been very, very savvy. I think a lot of credit has gone to his lead-out pilot, Michael Morkov. But when you see, Alaphilippe, he's been contributing to the lead-out train, hasn't he? I think it was a stage that Cavendish won into Carcassonne on stage 13, where Alaphilippe in the World Champions jersey was pulling on the front, well under the Flamme Rouge as well. They're just a very well-drilled unit, aren't they? Aren't they? And I think it goes to show that had Sam Bennett have been here as well, on top form, he would have been unstoppable in this year's Tour de France as well. But a bit like what Pete said as well, it's not just actually on those sprint stages. They've been very, very savvy in looking after him. They've sent bodies back to make sure he gets through those mountain stages. The the time cut into this stage into Teen, I think just before the first rest day, that was brutal. It did look like it was going to be touch and go, but actually because they deployed so much resource to getting him through that stage, they got him through it. And even then, I think another thing that people may not have picked up on is that the stage into Nîmes, which came after the double Von 2 ascent, where there's a lot of talk about this could be a sprint stage. This could be a sprint stage for Cavendish. Actually, Deceuninck were quite keen to let that break go, and it was a bit of the same for Friday's stage, wasn't it? With Mathieu Moritz winning in Le Bourne as well. I think the kind of fact they've almost taken the pressure out of Cavendish by giving him that kind of day off after the really heavy mountain stages, just to let him rest, just to make sure that he doesn't get beaten and other riders get their confidence up. They've played it very well.
Actually, you mentioned that with Mohoric, Pete, because we saw the French police, and you can probably update us on the story fully. We saw the French police raid, was it the hotel or the buses of Bahrain Victorious?
Well, they went to the hotel, and as I understand it, they raided the bus. I mean, we spoke to Mohoric at the Loose Ardiden finish, actually.
Was this before? Was that before or after the police?
That was after, so that was the next day. So Mohoric actually, I mean, we asked him, given the fact that the police raided you yesterday, did you not think of kind of keeping your head down? And he said, well, I wanted to do the opposite. I wanted to see that I've nothing to hide. I wanted to race and be active and kind of make a point of the fact that I've not done anything wrong. And he also said that, and kind of detailed some of the stuff they'd taken away. He said they'd taken mobile phones away. They'd taken training plans away. They'd even taken some food away, apparently. And the investigation's kind of ongoing. That's really all we know about it. I mean, it's been overseen by this organisation within France that's part of the French police that kind of looks into all kinds of crimes relating to people smuggling, to doping rings and all kinds. So they're based in Marseille. They kind of looked after the investigation that was conducted into Nairo Quintana and his team last year, which still we haven't really seen the end of. I mean, there are rumours that it's not actually going to come to anything, but it hasn't been officially closed down yet. So it's the same group. And again, we don't really know what's going on. We kind of think they've been tipped off by somebody, but who that is and what's going on, we're not entirely sure.
So do you think Mohoric, when he did the old sealing the lips gesture as he crossed the line, was that clever or not clever?
I mean, to him, because
it harked back. It was Armstrong, wasn't it, who did the same thing?
It was back to Armstrong. I mean, I'm guessing that Mohoric, I mean, he's only 26 or something. He probably didn't know about Armstrong doing that, so it didn't look clever when he did it. I mean, he was just trying to say. I mean, as he said to me after the stage, look, just keep your mouth shut until we know what's going on, instead of I mean, there was all kinds of rumours going around on social media about what they've been up to and accusations being made about certain riders. And I mean, we don't know what's going on. And I mean, whether we'll find out in time, that remains to be seen. Like I said, we haven't heard anything about the Arkea Nairo Quintana investigation. So we've just got to wait and see, basically.
Well, I'll tell you what, let's hear now from the Course En Tête's answer to Thelma and Louise, but hopefully with a happier ending. That's Sophie and Jez as they muse on this year's tour as they make their way to Paris for the final stage.
So how far we got to go? What is it, 300 and...
Yeah. 258 kilometres.
258 kilometres. Police car, slow down, police car.
I'm doing 120.
He's gunning. He's got a speed gun.
I'm doing 130.
It's a long way, isn't it? Sophie, was that a vintage Tour de France for you? I mean, it was a good tour, I guess. Was it a great Tour de France?
Yes and no. I think it was great in that Tadej Pogačar has won his second title, and although he refuses to say that this is the beginning of a new era, it is. I think everyone but him perhaps thinks that. All the other tours I've done more or less have been won by Ineos Grenadiers or an incarnation of that team. They've won it in a very particular style, which is not how Pogačar and UAE Emirates have tackled the last two tours. So in that regard, I found it refreshing, and I think it's been a vintage tour. On the other hand, I think that opening week with all the crashes took out a lot of people and a lot of big names. If not immediately, then the week afterwards when they were succumbing to their injuries. And I think that perhaps not downgraded, but affected the competition, or what may have been a bigger fight for the sprints for the yellow jersey, had those people still been in there. But also equally can't say that. You can only go on what's happened in the race, and I think Pogačar is an exceptional athlete on and off the bike, and that'll be my lasting memory for the Tour.
I mean, there's no way that you can't say that all those crashes had a dramatic impact on the race outcome. There's no way you can't say that, the fact that even in the final week of the race, we were talking to riders and they were still saying, I'm still banged up, I'm still really sore from the crash on the first day. The crash that was caused by the spectator with the sign. I mean, it's incredible, isn't it, to think 3 weeks later that incident, it did have a big impact on the race. I mean, both of us were quite indignant that that spectator was kind of pursued by the authorities. We thought it was a bit of a witch hunt. And I guess it was, but at the same time, it did really impact on the outcome of the race.
I don't know if I'd go that. I still think the conjecture around this ban is unfair. Yes, that was a terrible crash. Yes, it brought down a lot of people. And yes, some people did have to abandon the race after that. There were some shocking stories of injuries suffered. But, a lot of people also came down in stage 3. Caleb Ewan smashed his collarbone in 4 different places in a race incident. Primrose Roglic came down on stage 3. Again, not...
Primrose.
I am driving and it's sunny and I'm overtaking someone at a fast speed. At a speed that I'm not allowed to do in my own country. Primrose Roglic, see now you know who I mean. He came down in a race incident caused by riders or caused by the safety of the course, or how riders attacked an area of the course that they had deemed unsafe earlier. So to nudge every woe of the Tour this year on that spectator is, I think, bang out of line.
Yeah, but the key thing is that Teddy Focaccia, if I can call him that, didn't get involved in that crash, did he? He was, of all the riders that we've talked about and who are leaders, he didn't have a major crash. I mean, that makes a huge difference in this race.
Yeah, and again, that's a testament, I think, to the way he's approached the race and, who he is as an athlete, to come out of that first week unscathed. I don't even think he came down on top of somebody else. I guess indicates his skill. Sometimes getting involved in crashes is just really bad luck. Other times you're taking perhaps too much of a risk. Sometimes it's completely out of your control, like with a spectator and unforeseen circumstances. But the fact that he and his team were never in a position, or he was never in a position where his safety or his health in that regard was jeopardized, again, is a testament to the way he's not only raced the Tour, but a big part of why he's won.
I mean, for me, for a Tour to be a classic Tour, it has to have a lot of tension. So probably last year, would be quite up there, I guess, in terms of that final explosive time trial. This year, it feels like, for me anyway, I kind of knew, I thought he was going to win before the race started. I think most people did. And then by the time we got to that stage 5 time trial, a lot of the and we had the walking wounded trying to race against him, and then him just really dominating that time trial. And for me, a lot of the tension went out of the race then. And then you're looking at kind of what other stories there are. And of course, we had the Mark Cavendish story. We then had, it's not the Tour if you don't have a bit of controversy as well, which we had with the Bahrain Victorious raid 3 or 4 days ago, which added spice, and then Matej Mohoric's zip-lipped gesture. So, but I didn't think that there were that many great narratives. I don't know if you agree with that.
It's like the Tour every year, isn't there? There's just primary narratives that come out of it, and I guess it's where you look at what you see. I did a stage in the 3rd week on the back of a motorbike, and you see the race in such a different way, and you see how every individual rider is on the limit, or how they're approaching it, and every single one of them, every single person at the race, even us, has a story to tell every day. So it's not that they're not there.
Time to talk now about our presenting sponsor. I'm going to do that whilst using their product, because I have one and it's amazing, and I think it'd be a nice way to do it as I get my legs fresh again, because I did do a session on the turbo earlier. And now, if you've ever wondered how the Tour de France riders stay fresh and keep pushing day after day, there's the hot spot. They recover with Hyperice's top recovery tech, including the Normatec 2.0 recovery systems after every stage. Normatec technology uses dynamic, there we go, compression to increase circulation to the legs, flush out muscle soreness, and helps riders revive themselves quickly. Take your endurance to the next level like a pro. High-priced technology, including the Normatec 2.0, is available at trekbikes.com. Click the high-price banner on our homepage, which is pelotonmagazine.com, to claim a special Tour de France offer. Just to pick up on some of Sophie and Jez's points, Jez said, Nick, that it wasn't a tour with many compelling narratives. I feel it's been exciting. I sort of disagree with that, because I feel that even though we knew the outcome from whatever it was, the first week from the first rest day, it still has felt compelling to me.
Yeah, I think last week I compared it to a Pink Floyd Greatest Hits album, in that it's all perfectly nice, the individual songs work well, but there isn't that kind of coherent structure that we crave in a great GC battle. I mean, you're right. Yeah, the individual tales have been fantastic. Everyone talks about week one, and yeah, the stage wins and the winners there were really deserved, weren't they? Let's face it. Alaphilippe in the World Champions jersey, the Van der Poel tribute to Poo on stage 2. And even Tim Merlier's victory somewhat overshadowed by the events of the run-in into Pontivy as well. But that was an almighty win, given that it was Alpecin Fenix doubling up on stage wins. Yeah. Cavendish.
I'm going to disagree with you slightly. I'm just going to disagree with you slightly. You said there was no great GC battle. There was a great GC battle, wasn't there? It was great. We saw 3 riders going head-to-head in that final week. We saw Carapaz versus Pogacar versus Vingegaard. I mean, as long as you take out the 5 minutes, but there was that GC battle.
Yeah, but that ultimately it's a bit like when you see on Sky Sports they're trying to make the Premier League sound exciting because it's the race for the top 4, and ultimately it's it's a bit of an irrelevance, isn't it? Really, it's all very well, and it's a great achievement. I'm not belittling riders coming second and third in the Tour de France, but really, if you're basically from, let's face it, from stage 5 onwards, unless Tadej Pogacar kind of end up crashing or ditching it somewhere, he looked in control of this race. Even though he only moved into yellow jersey on stage 8. Let's face it, 5 days into the race, we're all kind of looking at ourselves thinking, this is done here. He's got this under control.
Yeah. How many tours do you reckon he's going to have to win for us all to learn how to say his name? Because I still can't do it.
Well, that's the problem. Is it Toddy or Tadej, Pogacar? I mean, it's I think it's Pogacar, isn't it? But again, I can lapse between various pronunciations. It's a bit like Peter and Petter Sagan, isn't it? Just one day.
I'm going to call him Pog from now on. Most dominant performance since when, do you reckon?
I don't know that we've seen anything like that in the Sky era. The one that he reminds me most of is Vincenzo Nibali, who won the 2014 Tour, and obviously Chris Froome was a defending champion, crashed out early on. Nibali was already in the yellow jersey at that point. He'd won in Yorkshire. He kind of briefly lost the yellow jersey to Tony Galopin, then took it back the next day by winning at La Planche de Belleville, if I remember rightly. He ended up winning 4 stages, and he was just completely out of sight. And it was a similar tour. It had that similar feel of the rivals that were expected to kind of line up against Nibali, who were Alberto Contador and Chris Froome essentially back then. Both ended up crashing out, and then you saw people coming through from the second rank, I suppose, in Jean-Christophe Perrault and Thibaut Pinot. And this year we've seen Jonas Vingegaard and Richard Carapaz coming through. And I mean, it's been a good race. I mean, Vingegaard and Carapaz have made it really interesting right to the end, and I've enjoyed it. I mean, I kind of, especially on Mont Ventoux, when Vingegaard actually dropped Pogacar going up towards the summit, I kind of thought, hang on, we've still got a race here. But then when he was reeled in on the way down, it was kind of that was it. The race was over essentially then. I mean, the stages have been really interesting. I've enjoyed every one of them, I think, since then. But as a GC battle, I think once that Ventoux stage was over, that was race done.
If we're talking about the teams, because obviously UAE have had a great Tour de France, so have Jumbo-Visma out of adversity. They have won 3 stages. They've got a rider who's about to come in second. William Fotheringham of Le Course En Tête, but writing somewhere else. He wrote about Ineos this year, and the headline of the article was Ineos, a faded imitation of Team Sky glory years at Tour de France. Nick, do you think this is just a blip for them?
Well, it's tricky to say, but let's face it. For 2 tours running now, they've looked well off the pace. They salvaged it last year with a stage win in the Alps, whereas this year they just Yeah, just looked very, very weird. I think there's almost a bit of a kind of a lack of clarity there. The idea of they were going to go in with 4 potential leaders, and we were told to kind of expect the unexpected. It almost says that they don't really know what they're doing, or they don't have an answer to the top 2 riders. One of whom's going to win the Tour de France shortly, and one of whom kind of crashed out in week 1. Basically, I don't get what their strategy is really. It's quite impressive that they still managed to rescue a podium finish out of this, just given how they've ridden. It's probably easiest for teams to kind of be quite confident in a nice position if you've got a rider of the ability of Pog. But let's face it, as it stands right now, Ineos possibly haven't. Bernal looked pretty good in the Giro, but again, the opposition there, it wasn't exactly the GC kind of the big guys really. It was very much a second-rate GC field as well. So I think it's interesting to see where they go from here. Really, I think Bernal Bernal at top form, the Bernal that we saw on the 2019 Tour may have given Pog a run for his money here, but it's tricky to compare. But I'm going to do it anyway. I still think Pog of 2021 beats Bernal of 2019.
Do you think? So do you think there was anything that anybody could have done with a full squad, no crashes? Let's take out all the stage 1, stage 2 crashes. Do you think anybody could have beat Pogačar and UAE?
Possibly Roglic. I think, let's face it, it was set up to be a 2-horse race this year, and that's probably where the disappointment kind of comes from it, because those two I think are a class apart when it comes to the GC at the minute. Let's not forget that they were basically separated by a minute last year, and after that there was only Richie Porte who was in 5 minutes of them. So you take out Pogačar, and we basically end up having the situation that Pete mentioned earlier with 2014 really. So some of the team's tactics have been questionable.
Ineos, a lot of people, you never take your facts from Twitter or never take your reactions from Twitter. But Pete, people were questioning what Ineos were doing. So do you think then, off the back of this, Pete, do you think there'll be a changing of the guard? They've got Pidcock, they have got young, exciting riders.
Yeah, just going back to the tactics, it wasn't only people on social media that were questioning them. It was, after one stage, I can't remember which one it was in the middle of the race, Tadej Pogačar was asked about the Ineos tactics and them setting the pace all day, and asked why he thought they were doing that, and he said, "I really haven't got a clue." So everyone was a bit bewildered by it. But looking ahead, it's going to be interesting to see what they do, because I think Geraint Thomas is out of contract at the end of this season.
You wouldn't bet on him being still. His entire sort of professional career has been at Sky and now Ineos. You wouldn't bet on him still being a part of this squad, would you, next year?
I don't honestly know. He's determined that he's going to come back and ride for the yellow jersey again, and he thinks he can do it a couple more times. And then
he got dropped. It's worth pointing out. Obviously, everything went wrong really quickly, but there was a stage before the crashes where he got dropped. He was dropped on the final climb. He was a few seconds off the pace.
Yeah, it was on stage 2, wasn't it, on Mur de Bretagne? Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's that there are massive question marks about the team. It's probably going to coalesce around Bernal now. He seems to be, like Nick says, he seems to be their one really genuine GC contender who can compete with Pogačar and with Roglic. And it'd be great to see. We've got the Vuelta coming up, and all 3 of them are supposed to be lining up there. It looks like it's going to be a pretty stellar field if everything comes together, and that's still a pretty big if, because we've got the Olympics to go before then, and Pogačar and Roglic may decide, well, we've had a long season and not go anyway. But next year it is looking exciting for the Tour. We'll probably have Van der Poel in for the whole event rather than for just a week. We'll have Roglic back. We've got a very exciting Jumbo team behind him. You've got Vingegaard, you've got Van Aert, who's he came into this Tour a bit undercooked, and he's going better and better all the time. And obviously Ineos will revamp as well. So it's going to be interesting to see what does happen next year. And obviously we've got other contenders coming through now. We've seen Ben O'Connor come through. There's the likes of Jack Haig, who crashed out in the first week, who's a very got a lot of potential and could come through as well. So it is. Pogačar talked in his post-race press conference yesterday about it being a golden age and this new generation of talent. And it is pretty incredible to see. It's not only in the classics, it's in the Grand Tours, it's everywhere. And they've got huge ability. They race in a very exciting way. And to be honest, I can't wait for next year's Tour, but we might see something thrilling at the Vuelta even before then.
I hope so. Let's say they all do go. Pog, Rog versus Bernal. I couldn't think of something that rhymed with Rog or Pog for Bernal. Bog. Pog, Rog versus Bog. Where does your money go? Nick, go on. Pog, Rog or Bernal at the Vuelta?
I would go Rog. Although the interesting thing with that, I think, is the fatigue that you'd imagine Pog would carry over from the Tour de France might actually kind of level the playing field, which is quite nice.
But he's not looked tired. Has he looked tired at any point?
No,
he has been in control of the entire race. He has looked like the best rider. On some days, he's looked like a different species of rider, admittedly, but that was towards the start. But he doesn't look like he's fatigued.
No, but I think but again, basing this on what we've seen in the past, when Chris Froome won the Tour and then headed to the Vuelta, I think in 2013 and 15 in particular, he looked pretty cooked, particularly in the really really high mountains. Whereas actually the year he won the Vuelta 2017, Sky were very very clever. They sent him to the Tour de France undercooked, which was why it was a little bit below par in week one, and Fabio Aru looked like he could kind of challenge for the yellow jersey, and actually they kind of got that just right. I don't think Pog came to the Tour de France trying to peak for week 3 and then basically going to get into shape for the Vuelta. I think he arrived on the start line in Brest in top form, and he's carried it through with him to the finish. Interesting.
Where would you go in the Vuelta if it was those three, Pete?
I think I go for Pog, actually, because he just strikes me as a bit like, he said he doesn't like to be compared to Eddie Merckx and Bernardino and people like that, but a bit like them. I think he's probably not going to go to a Grand Tour unless he thinks he can win it. I don't think he'd go to the Vuelta and thinking, I'm going to race round and finish third. I mean, he does say, cycling's great fun and I enjoy it and I love racing on the bike. But essentially, he loves winning, and I think that's what, if he does go to the Vuelta, that's what his aim will be.
I do hope he does. I really do hope he does. I actually do think, if it does happen, I think Bernal would have a shout, because I think Ineos would have to come roaring back, and I think they would throw everything at it, is my personal feeling on that. Before we get to finding out who won this stage, as we are recording this during the final stage of the Tour de France, they're just going down the Champs-Élysées one more time. Okay, here's my winner and loser from this year's 2021 Tour de France. My winner is Chris Froome, who, I don't know if you saw it today, was awarded from the press team the nicest and most polite Tour de France rider. Is that a new thing, Nick? Because I've never heard of that before.
Likewise, I know the journalists typically can come together and have a vote and award a prize for the politest rider and the most helpful. But it looks like somebody was having quite a lot of fun with that, because Geraint Thomas got the most laid back award as well, which again might be slightly tongue in cheek given how much time he's known for spending on the floor.
Yeah, Froome is lovely. I mean, I've interviewed him a few times, but it's sometimes, the nicest person when you annoy them. Because I've had to interview him about allegations in the past, and he's polite. Then you'll ask him a question, and his jaw sets, and he's still trying to be polite while knowing he's really, really pissed off at you for asking the question, which has to be asked. So go on then, Pete, winner and loser.
Froome was a good one. I think I was at the Dauphiné before, and I think my big winner of the Tour was Ben O'Connor. I mean, perhaps a bit of an odd choice, but he just took such a sensational victory at Tignes. He kind of finished 5 minutes ahead of everybody, and all right, he was kind of allowed to go a little bit, but the conditions are awful that day, and he almost rode himself into the yellow jersey. It would have been a sensational ride, and not only that, he kind of put himself into second place, and he stayed up there. I mean, he finished fourth in the end, and I just think he's a real talent. He's got such endurance, and maybe kind of a bit under pace when it comes to accelerating on the climbs. But I've really enjoyed watching him this summer.
Respect to Sophie Smith for, in the first show we did in the preview show, for saying watch out for Ben O'Connor. Nick, winner or loser?
I think my winner is going to be Mark Cavendish. So watch him lose the stage. Now I've said that typically that would be kind of the commentator's curse. I think the loser, it sounds pretty harsh saying this. I think it's Roglic, isn't it? Let's face it, he's 31, and he just can't quite crack the Tour de France. He's an elite Grand Tour rider, probably one of the top 3 Grand Tour riders that we've got in this generation, and yet he just can't get over the line in that big one.
Well, you mentioned Mark Cavendish maybe not winning this final stage. Let's find out what happened.
Made it to Paris on the Champs-Élysées. I don't know where Sophie is. Our hotel's in different places. But we're here at the end of the 2021 Tour de France, waiting for the riders to come onto the Champs-Élysées on a beautiful Parisian afternoon. And it's been a tour of great drama in the first week, and then a kind of sense of predictability, I guess, in the final week. But nonetheless, when you stand here on the Champs-Élysées and you see the magnificence of this incredible city, this really beautiful city, and you think of the pandemic and everything that we've all been through, and then the race, the eternal race, comes onto the Champs-Élysées, it's really something special.
I'm standing 150 metres just past the finish line of the 21st and the final stage of the 2021 Tour de France. The bell lap has just gone. We've got one lap to go. You'll be able to hear in the background a French commentator calling the race, and also the team cars now that are following the peloton along the cobblestones of what otherwise I understand is a major thoroughfare in Paris, but always on this day in July or at the end of the Tour de France is hallowed turf, especially for the sprinters, the pure sprinters of the bunch. It's an unofficial world championship for them. Winning a stage of the Tour de France is career defining, but for pure sprinters, winning a stage of the Tour de France on the Champs-Élysées, it's just that extra bit special. The finish line is actually 300 metres, about 300 metres up, further up from where it used to be. So whether that makes a difference to the result is yet to be seen. Right, they're coming to the final approach now. Past the team buses, around the final bend. You'll be able to hear the commentator behind me. And a surprise winner. Oh my goodness. Wout van Aert. He's on the radio, screaming into his radio. A few people actually predicted that. Wow. Not a day for Cavendish. Maybe that extra 300 metres did make a difference. A sensational tour for Jumbo-Visma, even though they lost Primož Roglic. The peloton is that they pretty much slow straight after the finish. In other stages they would fly by, but they all sort of come to a gentle rolling stop. Michael Matthews and Mark Cavendish having a hug on the road. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a fitting end to what has been a different Tour de France and the confirmation of a new era. It's not time for analysis after that sprint, as would usually be the case. All the teams, they find all their teammates, they find each other, they're huddled in groups, just chatting casually, hugging each other, having a soft drink. And that noise behind me will be for the stage winner. Cavendish not currently with his teammates, but with his family.
Well, there we go. We've just seen Mark Cavendish come third across the line, which I guess doesn't ruin everything we've done on this podcast before this moment. He still is the greatest sprinter of all time, but he doesn't break the Merckx record. Tactically, Nick, what went wrong there?
Oh, if he could have that one back, I think he would. He'd play it differently, wouldn't he? There was a gap there for him. It opened up nicely, and it was only about 100 meters to go. The clean air was there, and he hesitated. In that time, Jasper Philipsen closed the gap, shut the door, all a clean move, all completely fair, and that was it. Cav was essentially boxed in. By the time he got any look up the inside of Wout van Aert, they were on the Skoda markings, they were approaching the finish line, and he was never going to get round in there. That's I think that will be a tough one to take for Cavendish, because based on what we saw there, he probably had the speed to win it, but he just didn't follow the move when it opened up for him.
I mean, it still is the point that he is the greatest sprinter of all time. It's still amazing he's come back and won all these stages at this year's Tour after being written off, Pete. And do you think we will see him next year? I mean, he's got to now. I mean, he's equal with Merckx. He's got to come back next year, hasn't he, and break the record?
Well, I'd like to see him come back. Yeah, I mean, I mean, we don't know whether he's going to have a contract with Deceuninck Quickstep or with anybody else for next season.
I thought he had. I thought Deceuninck Quickstep had offered him a contract. Was that not signed?
He might well have done. I mean, I think he said himself that he still sees him as the second sprinter now behind Fabio Jakobsen, who's obviously working his way back to health and fitness. Whether Jakobsen will be ready next year is obviously a big question, given his big crash at the Tour of Poland and the amount of time it's taken him to recover from that. So maybe that gives Cav an opportunity. I don't know, but I'd like to see him come back and go for the record. But I mean, I suppose one thing we shouldn't forget, he has won the green jersey for only the second time in his career, and that's an astonishing thing in itself at the age of 36.
It is still very much amazing. He is still the greatest sprinter of all time. Let's talk about the person who won the stage then, because Wout van Aert has now won a mountain stage, and not just any mountain stage, up the Ventoux twice. He's also won a time trial, and now he's won a sprint stage. I mean, that is some rider, Pete.
He's astonishing. Yeah, I mean, he came into the race a bit undercooked. He'd had an appendix operation, which had upset his tour preparation a little bit. There was talk in L'Equipe today about could he win the Tour de France and would he be interested in winning the Tour de France. I mean, Van Aert himself, after the time trial yesterday, he said he wants to focus on the classics, and Jumbo are putting some resource into helping him do that. I know they're bringing in Christophe Laporte from Cofidis next season. I think they've got some other riders lined up as well. So it seems like his focus is going to be on the classics, and you kind of think, where's the opportunity for him at the Tour de France? Because they've still got Roglic, they've now got Vingegaard, they've obviously got Sepp Kuss, who's got his own case, good case to put forward as a GC contender. So maybe there's not the space there for Van Aert, and maybe he's not quite the rider to lead a Grand Tour team anyway.
I mean, it has been a great tour for Jumbo-Visma out of adversity. I mean, they have been the phoenix from the flames, haven't they, Nick?
Yeah, they've saved it quite nicely, actually. It was quite funny because when Sepp Kuss won the stage into Adora just a week ago, there were quite a lot of kind of journalists on Twitter and amusing on themselves in the press about what they do, and they've sent all these people up the road. If Jonas Vingegaard gets a problem here, his GC chances are done. And basically, they went big, they went bold, and we were talking earlier about what could have Ineos done to improve their race. Jumbo-Visma have showed that actually, if you are going to have different options or have multiple leaders, at least make them different. They're all kind of got their strengths, and Roglic going out, I think he had a chance of winning this race, but to come away with the haul of stage victories that they've done is it basically shows their strength in depth. I'm not quite sure the party tonight will be particularly good for Van Aert, because I think in 4 hours' time he leaves for Tokyo. He's straight on a plane at 11:30 local time, so he might be able to fit a couple of beers in before he has to go to experience the nightmare that is Charles de Gaulle Airport.
Well, yeah, I've got lost in Charles de Gaulle a few times, I must admit it. Is it the worst airport on the planet, do you think?
Quite possibly.
Yeah, it's just so massive and none of it makes any sense. A little bit like me. And that is it. Thanks for being a part of these podcasts and being with us through what has been the usual roller coaster ride of the biggest bike race on the planet. One lap of France never disappoints. Thank you to Pete. Thank you very much, Pete.
Thank you, OJ.
Thank you to Nick for joining us for this. Thank you very much for your tactical analysis.
A pleasure.
Say hello to the Paris that is Greenwich. A long-distance virtual high-five to Jeremy Whittle and Sophie Smith, wherever they are right now. In just over a month, all eyes will head to Spain and to Burgos for the individual time trial that will start the final Grand Tour of the season. It's going to be amazing, fingers crossed, for Rog versus Pog versus Bernal, and we will see you there. Adios for now.
Via, via, vieni via di qui. Niente più ti lega a questi luoghi, neanche questi fiori azzurri.